Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Lock your Soyuz hatch and put your helmet on.
10,
Ground control
9,
to Major Tom.
7, 6,
Commencing countdown, engines on.
And welcome back to PPSIMMONS Radio. That voice singing Space Oddity, that is none other than astronaut Chris Hadfield. That's right. And Chris Hadfield is in the news today. He is, there's an article in the Sarnia Observer. Sarnia, Ontario, Canada is where Chris Hadfield is from. And Chris Hadfield has agreed to do something that will put to shame the Canadian government, the Canadian healthcare system, and the CBC radio. And I'm going to explain all of this to you now here. Astronaut Chris Hadfield to be guest speaker at MRI fundraising gala. Astronaut Chris Hadfield, a Sarnia native and former commander of the International Space Station, will be guest honor and keynote speaker at the Sky is Not the Limit fundraising gala on Thursday, October 17th of this year at the Holiday Inn in Point Edward. Point Edward is an adjacent village to Sarnia. It's on the border of Michigan with Port Huron, Michigan. There, if you take I-94 all the way to the end, all the way east to the end, you will be in Port Huron, Michigan, and you jump across the border there, the Blue Water Bridges there, and you'll be in Sarnia, Ontario. Proceeds from the event will support the Blue Water Health Foundation's MRI campaign. In 2012, the foundation launched a $2.8 million campaign to fund the purchase of a new magnetic resonance imaging machine, an MRI machine, for Blue Water Health. To date, more than 70% of the fundraising goal has been met. The MRI was commissioned in 2012, and more than 8,000 scans have been performed, including 265 pediatric scans, a service not previously possible previously. Whoever wrote that, whoever edited this article, should have done a better job with that one, with that sentence. The MRI was commissioned in 2012, and more than 8,000 scans have been performed, including 265 pediatric scans, a service not previously possible previously. Okay, let's move on from that. In addition to the gala, the foundation, in partnership with the city of Sarnia, is offering students from across Sarnia-Lambton the opportunity to meet Colonel Hadfield during a free education event in Sarnia on the same day. The session will allow students to interact with, it's free because the students will not be able to afford the tickets, by the way, for the actual keynote address at the Sky is Not the Limit fundraising gala. Further details on the free event for the students, because students don't have this kind of money, will be announced later. Sarnia Mayor Mike Bradley said, "Every time Chris comes home, it is a reason for our community to celebrate. Just as we are all extremely proud of Chris and his many accomplishments, Chris has always been proud of his Sarnia roots. Not only is he returning home to help raise funds for Blue Water Health, and I would also add returning home to put to shame the Canadian government, the Canadian healthcare system, and CBC radio in a moment. More on that. Not only is he returning home to help raise funds for Blue Water Health, he's going to spend time sharing stories and inspiring over 600 students from Sarnia and Lambton County. Hadfield was in orbit aboard the ISS, the International Space Station, for 5 months before returning to Earth in May of 2013. In his passionate and illuminating talks, Hadfield imparts the useful and practical lessons he's learned throughout his remarkable career in the fields of leadership, teamwork, collaboration, science, and technology, and motivates audiences to achieve dreams higher than the clouds. Now, that is the article. If you want to go, tickets for the gala are on sale now and available through the Blue Water Health Foundation by calling. Tickets are $250 each and include a charitable tax receipt for $100. So You pay $250 for a ticket to hear this guy, and I'm sure it would be a very good speech. And you only get a tax receipt for $100, which I guess the government says that even though they're charging $250, the actual value of this event is $100. That's the government's take on it, I guess. But here's the problem. I want to talk to you guys about this. This is where, if America goes to single payer, which is what Harry Reid thinks it's going to go to, just as Canada's single payer, the government pays all the bills, and it's all part of your tax liability to the government. Chris Hadfield is being brought in to raise $2.8 million to help raise that money for this machine that is required to do check on people's health, et cetera, et cetera. And Ontario has what's called OHIP. It's the Ontario Health Insurance Plan. And OHIP is essentially rationed health care. You have to stand in line to wait for specialists, sometimes for months at a time. You have to do fundraising to buy machines because the government doesn't cover everything. People are going to the United States while the United States still has the best healthcare system in the world. People are going from Canada, sort of jumping ahead of the line, essentially, in order to get better healthcare, more timely healthcare that is required to get healing for cancers and other ailments, before the clock runs out, before your body says, yeah, we can't go on anymore. We can't wait anymore for this specialist to have time for you. We can't wait for that. So people are going to the U.S., paying the money to go to the U.S. to get the treatment that's required for them to stay alive. And that's what's happening. But in Canada, if you don't have that kind of money in Canada, then you have to wait in line. And people are dying in this line. It's a real line. Even the Prime Minister is not allowed to jump the line. So people are suffering in this line, waiting for the specialists to come available. And people are having to pay $250 a ticket to hear this guy speak in order for them to buy a machine under the rationed healthcare system. But here is my personal gripe about all of this. While people are being asked to pay $250 a ticket, 2.8, almost $3 million for this machine in this rationed so-called free healthcare system that we have, while people are being asked to pony up money for that, people are being robbed through their taxes in order to pay for CBC radio. This is my biggest beef with this, because if they would defund CBC radio, which is a Liberal Party mouthpiece, a propaganda for liberalism in Canada, CBC radio and television. More of the radio side. More on that in a moment. But the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, has an annual budget of, well, the numbers that I'm able to find here go back to 2006, where the CBC received $1.53 billion in funding. $1.53 billion for a media empire, designed specifically to exist for the promotion of liberalism, folks. Now, we have people dying out here in Canada, waiting for specialists. We have to have astronaut Chris Hadfield come out and speak the keynote address to the tune of $250 a head to raise money for an MRI machine to keep people alive. And yet, the government is taking money from the Canadian public in order to pay for a radio station. And that is the problem that I have with this whole thing, because the CBC does not speak for me, it does not speak for my family, and it does not speak for the vast majority of Canadians. And yet the vast majority of Canadians, at some point, they're going to need health care. They're going to need it. The Canadian healthcare system represents the Canadian people. CBC does not. And yet CBC is receiving it's probably up closer to $2 billion a year in funding. $1 billion a year. This is a country that only has 30 million people in it. And the radio side is 100% taxpayer funded. Now, the television side, they accept advertising money. But the radio side, which probably receives half of the money, so let's say the radio side receives $1 billion a year in taxpayer funding. With nobody ever asked, it's not like NPR. NPR asks people to donate, and then they get a tax receipt, right? CBC, nobody asks the Canadian public if they want to give to this abomination to the tune of $1 billion a year, $2 billion if you throw in the television side. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, it should be defunded. Now, would it be possible to say, okay, if you can raise the money, the government will issue tax receipts for the money that's raised? Yes. That would be a referendum on the value of this service, wouldn't it? Of course it would. But because many Canadians do not even listen to this atrocity, this liberal mouthpiece, which promotes the child abuse of evolution, and promotes 100% the idea, the worldview, the ideology of liberalism, which is defined as a mental disorder, by the way. The CBC is 100% taxpayer funded against the will of a large portion of the Canadian people. And yet here we have Chris Hadfield. He's coming to Sarnia to speak at a gala, which is $250 a person, to raise money for health care, something everyone needs. And yet the Canadian people are being robbed through their taxes to pay for something that nobody needs. I am calling for the defunding of the CBC right now. And let's start putting that money into the healthcare system to buy these MRI machines. My name is Mike Shoesmith. We're going to take a break now. We'll talk to you after the break.
To Major Tom, you